This is the second part of my previous video where I talked about the top 5 best movies of 2020, my personal preference, and today we had the same thing but the worst movies. I mentioned in that video that I've seen a lot of movies this year, so making a ranking on all of them would take up so much time and wouldn't have enough people willing to sit down for what would be probably an hour-long video. So today I've just gone for the top 5 worst of the year. Now I've seen every movie that I've pretty much wanted to and not thinking there'd be any more that would crank these. So without further ado, let's get into it. Coming in at 5th place we have The Grudge, the 2020 remake. I believe this was the second movie this year I saw after Bad Boys for Life. Instantly I knew there's not going to be many that are going to be below this. Clearly there is, but this movie, it was a horror movie reboot, to be honest, which no one really asked for. It had no emotion and zero likable characters and therefore no quality whatsoever. From the trailers it looked very bland and concealed, and I don't know what it was, but the colours just throughout it, the tone seemed dark but not in the way you'd want it to be. It's all just very straightforward but not enjoyable, and the way it's told is confusing, and therefore you already know what the outcome will be, so even if the characters were likeable you wouldn't care about them. There is no defending this movie. It had some solid actors and could have made a whole new fresh Grudge movie, but no, it was very concealed. As I said, felt like we were in the same room for the whole time, and just straight up a bad movie. Coming in at 4th place as my 4th worst movie of the year was Brahms The Boy 2. Once again, another horror movie we didn't ask for. First one being a reboot of a popular horror franchise, this one being a sequel to a horror movie which has its fans and then it has people that don't think it's that great. But even after this movie, the fans of the first one would hate this one as well. I never found the first one that great. I can understand why people like the twist of Brahms actually being this boy in the wall, not the doll. But then, as this is a sequel, it comes after. They can't really do the same thing by having that same twist as Brahms being a boy in the wall, because we already know that. So what do? They completely undo what they established in the first movie and go back to saying Brahms is the doll, which they make him the doll, but not just the doll, but a supernatural entity inside of it. Just shows how confused this movie does and strays so far from the first one. I can see why they did it, because that twist can't be redone, but a bad sign with the movie is when they undo things that were established in the first movie or the movie that came before, which was very ambitious from such a low budget horror movie sequel to undo something like that. It ruins the first one more, and I hope they don't get a third movie out of this. Or who knows, I can make a ranking. This was a very, very poor and lazy movie from all the characters, what they acted like, and it's just a shame that this was one of the last movies to come out in cinema this year when things were normal. Coming in at 3rd place we have Fantasy Island. Once again, another remake of a popular franchise. No, I think it's a TV series, I'm not sure. Pretty sure it was a TV series from the 70s. One of the more recent movies from this year that I've seen recently. And the only reason I watched it is because I thought it could be in this top 5, this bottom 5 list, I guess you could say. It has, on paper, some potential to do some cool stuff as it's more modern now, but from the trailers I knew that this was going to be awful. Like, there's this whole thing about this island which grants you your ideal fantasy, what you want. You know, some people would want to be rich or something, I'm not sure. But then there's just some dumb things, like I can kind of see like a guy wanting to be in the army. Is that like something you really want? You have something as special as this which can grant you what you really want, and he just wants to go into the army. I know there's a reveal where it actually grants you what you actually feel like, not what you ask for, so he sees his dad, which he never met or didn't see since when he was young. But there's just some dumb things, like once you get like on, you're granted a fantasy, one thing you can have, and this person decides to torture their high school or childhood bully. Stuff like that doesn't really help the movie. Also with the awful dialogue, terrible comic relief characters. You know, it was so annoying, I was cringing the whole time. Normally in horror movies there's someone to root for, but there's no one here because all the characters are forgettable or unlikable. And yes, that does include Michael Pena, who everybody loves. An extremely dumb movie, which I heard is actually getting a TV show its own. Not the same, it's like a rebooted thing, but my god, what an awful movie. Coming in at second place is American Pie Presents Girls' Rules. As soon as I saw this announced, I knew it was going to be another bad spin-off. But, you know, I'm a big fan of the American Pie franchise. Even the spin-offs, I know they're bad, but they're enjoyable, but this one wasn't enjoyable at all. First of all, it doesn't actually feel like an American Pie movie. It's not set anywhere which was mentioned previously. The only connection it has was that it had a Stifler in it, even though they didn't seem like one. The characters, like most on this list, were very unlikable. The only one I kind of liked, and it was for nostalgic reasons, was Zachary Gordon, because he's Greg Heffley. The way they acted together did not feel realistic at all, the way their friendship group went. I know these movies are over the top, but it's really hard to enjoy it at all when nothing feels real. Just in general, the whole thing is a cliche and very predictable, and if you waited however long it was, 8 years I think, for another American Pie movie, then you're going to be very disappointed with this one. Which leads me to my worst movie of the year. Drumroll please. If you've been on my channel and you've happened to see the review for this, you'll know that it's easily coming in at last place, or if you're watching it in terms of this top 5 worst, then first place. But we have Artemis Fowl. This is really one of the worst movies I have ever seen. Yes, there are a lot of worse movies, lower budget. Mainly why this is so bad as well is because, I'm not going to say expectation because I didn't think it would be good, but it's coming from Disney. It had like a $120 million budget. It had a lot of actors who were very well known. Judi Dench, Colin Farrell, Josh Gad, to name a few. And it's directed by Kenneth Branagh. You know, he's not top tier, but he does know how to direct a movie. And the fact that we got no character building, awful CGI, bad storytelling, and just straight up being bland in every department of this movie, it was a pain to sit through. You know, I hate to pick on people, especially with inexperience, but unfortunately Ferdia Shaw's first acting credit didn't go to plan. He wasn't good enough to be a lead in a Disney movie, as I mentioned before, his first professional acting credit. There's just no excuse for how bad this movie's been. I've already listed the budget, the cast, director. It's a movie which came probably 10 years too late, when it was more on the hype train, just like Percy Jackson was. Even though those movies aren't good, at least they did well, and this one could have. But it was very hard sitting through this one, and I hope I never have to see it again. But those were my top 5 worst movies of 2020. Just like I always do with my rankings, I'm going to leave up the ranking itself on screen with the scores next to it, so you can see just how bad some of these did get. If you're interested in seeing my whole list, I'll leave a link to my Letterboxd account down below, where it will take you to my list of all the 2020 movies I watched and what ranking I had for them. It also has the scores on there. But if you want to see what my top 5 best were in video form, I'll also leave a clickable card up in the corner. But yeah, thank you for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed. Tell me what your top 5 worst movies of the year were, and Happy New Year.